New year, new chapter. We've seen what the periodic table has to offer and the infinite usefulness of its information. Now we can look at how to represent the molecules made when atoms of those elements combine. Elements, as we've seen since the beginning of the year, are pure substances with consistent composition throughout. They're made up entirely of the exact same type of atom. So a sample of this gold is made entirely of gold atoms, and a sample of oxygen will be entirely oxygen atoms. Elements are identified by chemical symbols shown in the periodic table, as you've just done an entire chapter on. You know, it's too bad no one thought to make you research a bunch of different elements so you knew a little bit more about this stuff. An important thing to recognize here is that elements can be broken down physically but not chemically. So think back to bio and how food is broken down. You can break down this sample of gold physically by splitting it into smaller pieces of gold, smaller tiny physical pieces, and breaking the atoms apart from each other, but it can't be broken down chemically. The smallest bits of it will still be gold. There's nothing else to separate into. There's nothing else in there, there's no other elements in it. It's not like water where you can break it into potentially hydrogen and oxygen atoms. Compounds, by contrast, are made up of two or more different elements, but in very specific fixed ratios. That's a really key thing to remember here, represented by chemical formulas. Table salt, as shown here, NaCl, is 1 sodium to 1 chlorine. That's all it ever is. By definition, it is 1 sodium associated with 1 chlorine. They're shown a big repeating pattern in this picture, but there is 1 green sodium for every purple chlorine. If you go through and count, there is 1 to 1 all the way through. Similarly, water is always H2O. 2 hydrogens for 1 oxygen. Anything that looks different from that is not water. If a molecule has a different formula, then it's not water. Compounds can be broken down physically like elements can, but if you broke this big cube of salt into smaller pieces of salt, you can also break it down chemically by removing little chlorines from big sodiums, and can break it down now into separate pieces. You can't just break it down into smaller pieces of salt, you can also split the salt molecules up into different individual parts. By this point, all the questions on your sheet have been answered, and some of your classmates may have tuned out. And that's kind of unfortunate because we're finally getting to the real focus of this video. Drum roll, please. Cinnamon Toast Crunch. The myth and the legend. Okay, so quick history lesson. Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal was first released in 1984 and is made of small squares of wheat and rice, covered with a sprinkling of the cinnamon sugar that gives both its flavor and name. Because of the rice used in the cereal, it makes crackling noises in milk just like Rice Krispies. In 1993, a swirl design was added to each cereal piece in cinnamon, and if we're being honest here, it's kind of pointless. Maybe it adds a little flavor, but at what cost, sir? At what cost? At one time or another, there have been numerous spin-off cereals as listed here. Most have been discontinued. I've had French Toast Crunch and was unimpressed, though I do enjoy and appreciate the attention to detail of cereal that looks like little pieces of bread. Meanwhile, Peanut Butter Toast Crunch, Frosted Toast Crunch, and Sugar Cookie Toast Crunch just do not sound appetizing in the slightest. I think I tried Apple Cinnamon Toast Crunch and nothing about it worked. I'm told the limited edition Monopoly cereal was like regular Cinnamon Toast Crunch but with marshmallows based on Monopoly pieces. Because who hasn't been eating breakfast and thought to themselves, you know what this needs? A thimble and a 1930s race car made out of gross dehydrated sugar. And when traveling abroad, fear not, international options are available. Everyone loves a mascot, so someone came up with the idea for 3 bakers who spent their time making cereal like the Keebler Elves. The only one of them given an actual name was Wendell, the oldest baker, though the other 2 are sometimes mistakenly called Bob and Quelo. Wendell eventually became the only remaining mascot, leading to some pretty twisted fan theories about what happened to the other 2 guys. In recent years, someone had made the terrible decision to create anthropomorphic pieces of cereal called the Crazy Squares that keep trying to eat each other. From the start, the General Mills Company wanted a brand slogan to have the same recognition value as Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs or Silly Rabbit Tricks are for kids. The best they've come up with is The Taste You Can See, usually featuring a boring adult making insane guesses to figure out why kids love this cereal. Side note, my apologies for reminding everyone that there have been Star Wars movies made after 1983. Side note to side note. Rogue One was quality, and Solo was also reasonably entertaining despite what you'll hear from people trying to sound hip by bashing the franchise even though they probably didn't have the nerve to publicly admit what an absolute failure of a film The Last Jedi was. Seriously, that movie makes the worst Hallmark Channel holiday movie read like Shakespeare. And that's the end of our first video. Quiz tomorrow on this to start the trend of frequent quizzes after readings or videos.